50,000 years ago, on isolated islands of the southern part of the Pacific Ocean, there lived a creature that seemed like a relic of the age of dinosaurs. Meiolania was a giant horned turtle whose appearance resembled prehistoric Mesozoic reptiles more than modern turtles. Imagine a turtle the size of a small car, shell length up to 2.5 meters, weight more than 1,000 kilograms. But the most striking feature was the massive head, decorated with a pair of bony horns up to 25 centimeters long, directed backward and to the sides. The head was so large that it could not be retracted into the shell, a unique trait among all known turtles. The tail of Meiolania was no less impressive. Covered with bony rings with sharp spikes at the end, it turned into a formidable defensive weapon. The tail length reached 1 meter, making the total length of the animal more than 3.5 meters from nose to tail tip. These armored giants inhabited subtropical forests and coastal plains of Australia, Lord Howe Island in the Tasman Sea, New Caledonia, and other islands of Melanesia. Here, in isolation from continental predators, evolution created one of the most unusual creatures of the Pleistocene. Meiolania survived until the arrival of humans, becoming a witness to the last millennia of the Ice Age. Their fossil remains, found in caves and sediments, tell an amazing story of a reptile that challenged time. The history of Meiolania began much earlier than the Pleistocene. Its ancestors appeared in the Cretaceous period, more than 80 million years ago, when dinosaurs still walked the earth. Meiolania belongs to the family Meiolanidae, an archaic group of turtles that split from the main evolutionary line back in the Mesozoic. This ancient family evolved in parallel with more familiar turtles, retaining primitive structural traits. Fossil remains of related species were found in South America and Antarctica, indicating the origin of the group on the ancient supercontinent Gondwana. When the continents separated, the Australian branch of the family found itself in isolation, where it continued to evolve in a unique direction. On the Australian continent during the Miocene, 15 to 20 million years ago, smaller ancestors of Meiolania lived. Gradual increase in size, island gigantism, occurred over millions of years. By the Pleistocene, several species of Meiolania existed. Meiolania platyceps, the largest species, inhabiting Lord Howe Island, reached maximum sizes. Meiolania brevicalis from Queensland was somewhat smaller. Another species inhabited New Caledonia. Paleontological finds include almost complete skeletons, allowing detailed reconstruction of anatomy and lifestyle. The first Meiolania bones were discovered in the 1880s on Lord Howe Island, and scientists initially mistook them for fossil crocodile remains because of their unusual structure. Phylogenetic analysis shows that Meiolania represents a side branch of turtle evolution, with no direct descendants among modern species. This is an evolutionary dead end that existed for tens of millions of years. The shell of Meiolania was a massive bony structure up to 2.5 meters long and up to 80 centimeters high. The carapace, upper part, had a characteristic domed shape with pronounced keels, longitudinal ridges that provided additional strength. Shell thickness in the strongest places reached 12 to 15 centimeters. The bony plates were covered with horny scutes, forming a characteristic pattern. The shell coloration in life was probably dark brown or gray-green, with lighter areas. The plastron, lower part of the shell, was flat and massive, protecting internal organs from below. Unlike most turtles, the connection between the carapace and plastron was especially strong, creating an almost airtight armored capsule. The head was the most striking feature of Meiolania. The skull reached 50 centimeters in length and 40 centimeters in width. Two massive horns were directed backward and sideways at an angle of about 45 degrees. Additional smaller bony outgrowths decorated the upper and side parts of the skull. The neck was short and thick, covered with large bony osteoderms, peculiar armor plates under the skin. This additional protection compensated for the inability to retract the head into the shell. The tail was a formidable weapon, about 1 meter long. It was covered with bony rings, and at the end were large spikes up to 8 centimeters long, directed sideways. The tail could be used like a club, delivering painful blows to predators. Meiolania inhabited unique ecosystems of isolated islands of the southern Pacific during the late Pleistocene and early Holocene. Lord Howe Island is located in the Tasman Sea, 600 kilometers from the eastern coast of Australia. 50,000 years ago, the island was a volcanic massif with an area of about 14 square kilometers, covered with subtropical forests. The climate was humid and warm, with annual precipitation around 1,600 millimeters. The island's relief included coastal lowlands, hilly areas, and 2 mountain peaks up to 875 meters high. Meiolania lived mainly in low coastal areas and valleys, avoiding steep slopes due to its massiveness. Vegetation consisted of a mixture of fern forests, palm groves, and areas with grassy vegetation. Pandanus trees with their edible fruits, tree ferns, and various palm species created a multi-layered forest structure. New Caledonia, a larger island with an area of about 16,000 square kilometers, provided more diverse habitats. Here, Meiolania inhabited coastal plains, river valleys, and forest edges up to 300 meters above sea level. Caves played an important role in the life of Meiolania. Numerous fossil remains were found in karst caves, where turtles entered to shelter from predators, extreme weather, or for winter dormancy during cooler periods. Coastal zones with sandy beaches were used for egg-laying. Meiolania, like modern sea turtles, returned to the same beaches where it itself was born. Meiolania was a strict herbivore, specialized in consuming tough, fibrous vegetation of its island world. The basis of the diet consisted of leaves of various species of tree ferns. Young fronds were cut with the sharp edges of the jaws. In one day, an adult Meiolania consumed up to 30 to 40 kilograms of plant mass. Pandanus fruits, large orange-red compound fruits the size of a human head, were a favorite delicacy. Meiolania cracked the hard shell of the fruits with its jaws and ate the juicy pulp rich in carbohydrates and moisture. Palm hearts, the tender growing part at the center of the palm, required significant effort to obtain, but were a valuable source of nutrients. Meiolania could use its massive weight, leaning on young palms and bending them to the ground. The feeding process was slow and methodical. Meiolania spent 10 to 12 hours a day searching for and eating food. The jaws made slow chewing movements, grinding plant mass before swallowing. Like all reptiles, Meiolania was a cold-blooded animal, dependent on solar heat to maintain activity. Dawn began with long warming. The turtle crawled out of its night shelter, usually a cave, dense thickets, or a rock crevice, and occupied an open area where sunlight could warm the massive shell. Morning activity from 9 to 12 o'clock was a period of intensive feeding. Meiolania moved slowly across its territory, methodically grazing vegetation. Movement speed was only 150 to 200 meters per hour. Rainwater collected in natural depressions of the shell and flowed down the sides toward the head. Meiolania could drink directly from its own shell, placing its mouth under the flowing streams. On the isolated islands where Meiolania lived, large continental mammalian predators were absent. However, threats existed. Meiolania prisca, a giant monitor lizard, up to 5 to 6 meters long and weighing up to 600 kilograms, was the main predator of the Australian continent and large islands. Paleontologists call this monster the largest terrestrial lizard of all time. Meiolania hunted from ambush, using venomous saliva to weaken prey. Even adult Meiolania was not fully protected from its attacks. The lizard attacked the neck and limbs, the only vulnerable body parts not protected by the shell. The confrontation was epic: armored fortress versus venomous dragon. Meiolania used its spiked tail as a weapon, striking the monitor's snout, trying to drive the predator away. Quincana, a terrestrial crocodile with long legs reaching 6 meters in length, hunted on land, unlike modern crocodiles. Its powerful jaws could crush bones, but the shell of Meiolania was a serious obstacle. Giant predatory birds of the eagle family hunted young Meiolania. Hatchlings with still soft shells were easy prey. Eagles grabbed the young with their talons and carried them to nests. On Lord Howe Island, completely isolated from the continent, adult Meiolania had virtually no natural enemies. This allowed them to reach maximum size and longevity. The arrival of the first humans on the islands, about 50,000 to 30,000 years ago, marked the beginning of the end. Slow, predictable, with a huge supply of meat, Meiolania was an ideal prey. The inability to retract the head into the shell required Meiolania to develop alternative defense mechanisms. The horns on the head served as the main defense. When attacked by a predator, the turtle turned its head sideways, exposing sharp, bony outgrowths. The horns could inflict serious tearing wounds, discouraging further attack. Defensive technique included rotating in place, keeping the predator in front, and striking with the tail. Massive body and low center of gravity made the turtle almost impossible to overturn. Caves served as shelters of last resort. Crawling deep into a crevice, Meiolania blocked the entrance with its shell, making extraction impossible. Meiolania led a predominantly solitary lifestyle, like most modern land turtles. Sexual maturity in Meiolania occurred late, at the age of 25 to 30 years, when shell length reached 1.5 meters. Newborn Meiolania were miniature copies of adults, with the same horns on the head, proportionally smaller, and spiked tail. The shell was light brown with a more contrasting pattern than in adults. The first hours of life were critically important. Hatchlings instinctively headed toward the nearest shelter, fern thickets or rocks. Survival in the first year was only 10 to 15% due to numerous predators. The first years of life, Meiolania spent in dense vegetation, where camouflage and shelters provided protection from predators. Meiolania shared its island world with a variety of Pleistocene creatures. On Lord Howe Island, giant flightless birds of the rail family, the size of a small dog, wandered the forest floor searching for invertebrates. They coexisted peacefully with turtles, occupying different ecological niches. Endemic skink species, large lizards, reached lengths of 30 centimeters, feeding on insects and carrion. They often gathered near Meiolania droppings, attracted by insects. On the Australian continent, Meiolania coexisted with megafauna, giant wombats the size of rhinoceroses, enormous kangaroos 3 meters tall, and diprotodons, the largest marsupials of all time, weighing up to 2.5 tons. As a mega-herbivore, Meiolania played a critical role in maintaining the structure and diversity of island ecosystems. Large fruits of pandanus and palms were adapted for dispersal by Meiolania. After its extinction, these plants lost their main disperser, which changed forest structure. The island climate of the Pleistocene was characterized by a clear alternation of wet and dry seasons, influencing Meiolania behavior. Despite powerful shell protection, Meiolania suffered from various diseases and parasites. Meiolania possessed exceptional longevity even by turtle standards, known for long lifespans. The arrival of the first humans on the islands of Oceania and in Australia, about 50,000 to 40,000 years ago, marked the beginning of the end for Meiolania. Archaeological finds on Lord Howe Island show traces of human activity dated 30,000 to 20,000 years ago. In caves, Meiolania bones with stone tool butchery marks were found. Hunting was simple. The slow turtle could not escape. Hunters overturned Meiolania onto its back, making it helpless, then killed it with blows to the head or opened the plastron. One adult Meiolania provided 200 to 300 kilograms of meat, enough to feed a group of 20 people for a week. The shell was used as a water container, or shelter. On Lord Howe Island, Meiolania went extinct about 20,000 years ago. In New Caledonia, turtles survived until 10,000 to 8,000 years ago. In Australia, the last populations disappeared 40,000 to 35,000 years ago. A combination of factors, hunting, habitat destruction, climate change, led to complete extinction of all Meiolania species by the beginning of the Holocene. The last Meiolania probably died alone, somewhere on a remote island about 8,000 years ago, ending an evolutionary line that had existed for tens of millions of years. The first Meiolania bones were discovered in 1882 on Lord Howe Island by an English naturalist. The unusual nature of the find caused confusion. They were first mistaken for crocodile or even dinosaur remains. In 1886, British paleontologist Richard Owen officially described a new genus and species, naming it Meiolania platyceps, lesser wanderer with a flat head. The name reflected the unusual anatomy. Meiolania left no direct descendants. All Meiolaniidae lineages went extinct by the early Holocene. This is an evolutionary dead end with no modern relatives. The closest living turtles, representatives of the suborder Cryptodira, to which most modern species belong, diverged from the Meiolania line more than 200 million years ago. The ecological niche occupied by Meiolania on islands remained vacant after its extinction. No other species filled the role of mega-herbivore. The disappearance of Meiolania changed island ecosystems. Plants dependent on turtles for seed dispersal reduced their ranges or went extinct. Modern Galapagos and Seychelles giant tortoises are ecological analogs of Meiolania, occupying similar niches on their islands, but are not related. The study of Meiolania helps understand island evolution processes, the role of megafauna in ecosystems, and the consequences of its extinction. Meiolania is a testament to the astonishing paths of evolution. On isolated islands, nature created a creature that seemed an anachronism, even in its own time. An armored reptile with horns and a spiked tail, more fitting for the Mesozoic era. Its extinction reminds us of the fragility of island ecosystems and of the destructive impact the appearance of a new predator, especially Homo sapiens, can have. But in museum collections, fossil remains, and scientific reconstructions, Meiolania continues to live, telling its story of an ancient world that vanished forever, yet left traces in stone and memory.